we're on track for a terrorist attack to be carried out here inside of the United States sometime in the near future. It's just more likely right now than it has been in quite a while. And look, I hope I'm wrong. Hopefully we look back on this video in 6, 12, 18 months and you can point out all of the areas where my assessment was off. It's just there's a lot of things right now trending in the wrong direction. It's kind of setting the stage for somebody or a group to carry out some sort of attack. Now, as we've done in previous videos, I'm going to get into the most likely course of action here as well as the most dangerous. The most likely course of action is tied to a lone wolf-inspired type attack. So seeking inspiration from a group or a cause or events abroad and carrying out an attack here in the United States. The most dangerous is tied to international terror groups taking advantage of the current global sentiment, we'll say. So diving into this lone wolf-inspired type attack, these are always incredibly challenging to defend against because it's just somebody, an individual, decides one day that they've reached the breaking point. They have now been radicalized. They're going to carry out violence to achieve some degree of political, religious, organizational aims, right? Very hard to intercept when just an individual becomes radicalized on their own, in a sense, and carries out some sort of attack. Now, there's a number of reasons somebody could reach that breaking point, if you will. Right now, a very clear one, front and center in a lot of media, is the war in Gaza. Now, I think a lot of people are looking at this war as between Israel and the Palestinian people. But if you look at media coming out of the so-called axis of resistance from Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and others, every single day, they are not talking about a war between Palestine and Israel. They're talking about a war with the United States and how the United States is responsible for every single thing that happens in Gaza. Just in the last few days, Hamas has put out statements saying, quote, "We hold the Nazi Zionist occupation and the U.S. administration fully responsible for the ongoing escalation in the region." Or, quote, "We hold the Israeli occupation and American administration fully responsible for the continued closure of the crossings and for exacerbating the humanitarian health situation in the Gaza Strip." So how long until the wrong person hears that message that is not hidden, it's not on the dark web, it's in public mass media, right, all across social media. How long until the wrong person hears that message and decides that they're going to take action however they can? Right? Even if it's some crude type of attack, it's not crazy to think that somebody is going to register with the wrong person at the wrong time that has the means to actually do something about it. Again, this isn't like secretive. You don't have to jump on the dark web and to where people can track who is actually looking at this Hamas messaging. It's out there in the open in major publications day in and day out. Now, if we look at how these protests have evolved across the United States, however you want to phrase them, right, related to the ongoing war in Gaza, call them pro-Palestinian protests, ceasefire protests, anti-Israel protests, whatever terminology you want to use there, I don't think it's crazy to look at those and how they've evolved since October 7th and say that before too long, we could see violence coming from that. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that those protesters or the protests in their entirety are going to turn violent all of a sudden. But if you look at kind of the steps they've been taking in these protests to the more burning of flags, the graffiti, the damaging equipment, harassing people nearby, it seems like it's trending in the direction to where somebody inside of that protest might have the idea that they're going to move this forward another step. And that next step could be an act of terrorism, an actual attack against American citizens. So we just have to recognize that in terms of this lone wolf style attack, every single day there is messaging coming out alongside images and videos of Palestinians being killed in Gaza that has the possibility of radicalizing people here in the United States to take actions into their own hand and actually carry out a terrorist attack. Because again, Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, Iran, and this entire axis of resistance, kind of fueled by some supporters here in the West, are not just pointing the finger at Israel, they're pointing the finger at the United States. So eventually somebody gets fed up, they want to take action, they take action where they can here in the U.S. Now, turning to the most dangerous course of action, we're going to look at 3 different international terror organizations, and we're going to bypass right through some of the axis of resistance. I'm not going to talk about, in this case, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, or Iran, because that's not really how they operate. I mean, technically, any one of those groups that are actively engaged in this war, they could strike on U.S. soil. Some have the capabilities more than others, but historically, they've been much more focused locally and or regionally. So it would be kind of out of the ordinary at this point for any one of those groups inside of the self-proclaimed axis of resistance to actually carry out attacks abroad, or abroad in terms of the United States. Additionally, there are 3 groups worth getting into here that are much more prone and have the current capabilities of doing just that. So in that sense, we're going to look at, in order of least likely to most likely, the Taliban, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, all of which, unfortunately, kind of operate right now out of Afghanistan, which is a problem, maybe a topic for another video. So I would generally leave, starting with the least likely here, I would generally leave the Taliban out of this conversation and kind of throw them in the camp with Hezbollah or the Houthis, in that they tend to focus almost exclusively on running territory. Afghanistan, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, that's how they've operated throughout their history. But since taking power just a couple of years ago, we've seen them more and more start to speak out about international events and provide their opinion or moral support around things like the October 7th attacks and the ongoing war in Gaza. Now, publicly stating an opinion or voicing support is, of course, a very, very far cry from the desire or even the ability to strike abroad, but it's a trend that we have to watch because it is unique, and this is not how the Taliban used to operate. So technically right now, the Taliban are lashing out at their neighbors. There are, degrees of military activity against countries bordering Afghanistan, but we haven't really seen the desire by the Taliban to lash out somewhere as far away as the United States. Again, not right now, but it's something worth keeping on the radar. The next up is Islamic State, when we're talking about the most dangerous course of action here, specifically Islamic State Khorasan province, which is also based in Afghanistan. Again, unfortunately, it's kind of the theme with these 3 groups here. Now, Islamic State, they hate Hamas. They always have. There's nothing new there, no love lost. The fact that Hamas took part in elections, remember that's one of the arguments about Gaza, as Hamas was elected by the people. That act means that Islamic State views them as illegitimate, weak, and connected to evil democratic processes. So in short, kind of a quick summary here, Islamic State hates everybody that is not them, right? So they view just about anybody who is less pious than them as being a problem. So Islamic State hates everybody, for the most part, that is not already Islamic State. Now, while Islamic State certainly does not like Hamas and would not attack abroad in support of Hamas, they might do so in support of the Palestinian people, recognizing that there is a degree of international support behind that cause right now. Again, Islamic State did not get to where they are today because they're stupid. They know how to take advantage of certain situations. So the reason I have Islamic State as more likely than the Taliban, but less likely than the last group here, is because Islamic State has been able to, especially Khorasan province, has been able to carry out attacks abroad recently, right? We've seen attacks into Russia and Iran just in the last few months, and they're making more and more threats about attacking abroad. They have those capabilities, but they still do have an aspect of their ideology that is focused on maintaining control, territorial control in a region. In this case, Khorasan province, portions of Afghanistan. It's the last group here that I would think is the most likely of these 3 to carry out an attack. That's Al-Qaeda. Now, I think a lot of people hear Al-Qaeda and they think that group might be no more, right? They kind of fell off a bit after 2001. Bin Laden was killed in 2011. His successor, Zawahiri, was killed in a drone strike a couple of years ago in Afghanistan. The new leader, Saif al-Adil, is kind of in hiding, believed to be in Iran. But there's a lot of arguments right now that Al-Qaeda is actually feeling a bit of a resurgence, potentially stronger now than they have been really any time since pre-2001. Now, Al-Qaeda, in comparison to Islamic State or the Taliban, a main focus of their organization is striking the far enemy or the United States. It's a core tenet of their mission. More than, they don't have desires of actually holding and maintaining territory. It's all about attacking the West. So we have to take that into consideration. Traditionally, Al-Qaeda has been pretty focused on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, just as a source of kind of moral support, a unifying event that they can say, hey, we're doing something to support the Palestinian people, our Islamic community, if you will. In fact, after 9/11, most Al-Qaeda attacks, in fact, they point to U.S. support for Israel as a major reason why any of these attacks are happening in the first place. So, an organization that has used the Palestinian cause as a justification for attacks in the past has been gaining more power in Afghanistan as of late. There were some recent United Nations monitoring team reports talking about how there's been multiple new training camps, headquarters facilities, and safe houses popping up in multiple provinces all across Afghanistan the last couple of years. So they're picking up speed, if you will. So if you're Al-Qaeda and you're looking for a way to get back in the headlines, drawing more recruits and funding, now might be the time to strike, right? There's an issue they can connect themselves to, the war in Gaza, that will actually resonate with a handful of people more than it has in quite a while. So, for instance, 3 years ago, if Al-Qaeda were to attack the United States and say that they were doing this due to U.S. support of Israel, it's a little squishy, right? I feel like most people probably know that the U.S. and Israel are allies, but what does that really mean in 2021 or 2020? It's not overly clear, but right now, you see U.S. bombs and missiles falling in Gaza. You can point directly to that and pull up the news, and they can say, this is why we are attacking the United States. It's a lot more clear, which means it probably has a better chance of resonating with more people. Then, of course, I have to bring it back to the protests here. Again, not suggesting the protesters would be complicit in helping an organization like Al-Qaeda carry out these attacks. But if you're Al-Qaeda and you look at how these protests are playing out, when people are saying, our own citizens are saying that America is evil due to our support of Israel, doesn't that give an organization like AQ just a little bit of optimism that an attack might not be met with the full brunt of the U.S. government in response? All right, there's at least a little bit of a fracture there inside the United States. I mean, Al-Qaeda, a group like Al-Qaeda is never going to have 100% direct support inside of the U.S., but even just a little bit of noise saying, well, hey, maybe they're right, or maybe we shouldn't be doing this, that, or the other with Israel, that could be all that's needed for a group like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, the Taliban, or someone else to take advantage of this window of time to carry out that strike, recognizing that the response right now might not be as bad as it would have been, a year ago or at some point in the future whenever this war actually wraps up. So again, we're in a very dangerous window of time right now. For 9 to 10 months, the possibility of an individual being radicalized by what they see in Gaza has been increasing every single day. Every time they open their computer or pull up their phone, they can see more images and videos coming out of Gaza. And again, you have all of these groups saying it's not just Israel, it's the United States that is doing this. How many times will they see that message before deciding to take action? And of course, every day this war goes on is another opportunity for somebody to become radicalized to the point of carrying out an attack. And then we have these international terror organizations, namely the Taliban, although, again, low likelihood that they would actually be the ones to do this, Islamic State, specifically Khorasan Province, and then Al-Qaeda. Those organizations have always wanted to and still desire and have the capability of attacking the United States. Do they sense this as a window in time where they can carry out the attack and there will be less pushback by the United States, or could even be welcomed by some, dare I say? But that's all I got for now. Of course, if you're interested in learning more about any of these groups or other wars and conflicts happening around the world, be sure to check out our Substack, which is linked in the description below. It's our reader-funded publication. We try to provide a lot of background and insight on these different organizations, kind of what drives them, their ideology, and so on. Again, in the description if interested. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.